Hello, and welcome back to the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, and my guest today is my pal, Mia Dyson. If you don't know Mia, she is a multiple award, multiple times winning musician, songwriter, guitar player, all around amazing person. She and I go back quite a ways, and we talk about that a little bit at the start of the conversation. But for additional context, once Rolling Stone gave her album 4 stars, and she's been called a quote, top 25 guitar player of all time by a newspaper in Australia. And Pink, yes, Pink, said, quote, blowing my mind apart in response to seeing her perform and play. And while that is an incredible part of Mia's life, in this conversation, we focus primarily on something else entirely, which is that she died and then came back to life and had an experience with that and then made an album around it. So she had a near death experience as a musician. There's some eerie foreshadowing from previous lyrics. And so we talk about what happened, what that meant for her. It gives me goosebumps as I'm describing it here in the intro. But Mia's wonderful, huge heart, immensely talented performer. I highly recommend that you download. I'll put a couple songs in the show notes. One is called When the Moment Comes. I love that. Anyway, she's great. You're going to dig this conversation. It's going to make you think and it's going to make you feel. And what else do you want from a podcast? Oh, maybe it'll teach you some stuff too. So that's the trifecta. Think, feel, learn, enjoy this conversation with Mia Dyson.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action. Mia Dyson, welcome to the podcast. We're recording now.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Yeah, we actually go way back, and it's fun to see you again. You are an individual that randomly entered my life, and we like went on a little, or I basically crashed your tour and was like the fifth wheel recording some video of you in the studio, etc. And then I gave you a moped ride in Townsville, Australia, and haven't seen you in a couple years though. So
It's more than a couple, right? Yeah.
yeah,
I know you,
y-
our dear mutual friend Brendan is how
yeah.
we came to know each other. And then you were in Townsville, which is so cool and interesting. And I visited there on a tour.
That would have been like 2015, maybe. That was
I,
actually a long time ago.
yeah, I reckon about 2015, which is nearly 10 years ago.
That makes me feel old and philosophical.
Oh yeah,
Felt,
I'm definitely old and philosophical.
but Mia Dyson, for those listening that have no idea who you are, what you do, how do you describe yourself? Like, what's your
Yeah,
deal?
I am a guitarist, singer, songwriter. What else? A philosopher? No. I make records and tour, and I live in the States, but I'm from Australia originally. Married an American, got caught here. Still feel like I don't know where home is, but um, done a lot of moving around. And yeah, but entering a strange new phase of life, I think, middle age, which is gets a bad rap, I feel, but it's like it's very interesting time, I think.
Is he say more? Wait, what do you mean? What is middle age to you? Because I
Well,
relate. Like I'm in my 40s now.
yeah. Well, I feel like it's a for me a big time of reflection. Like I was looking forward, only forward for so many years. And also in my particular case just very focused on a music career. And although it's not just been a sudden change, it's been sort of, you know, several years coming. It feels like that sort of singular focus has just started to widen and widen and widen. And the downside or maybe it's not. I mean, not a downside, maybe, but like my ambition has just dropped and dropped and dropped. In terms of at least the sort of outward pursuit of success in music, and um, even as my I feel like my ability to write authentically and sing and discover ways to say things that feel meaningful has expanded. But yeah, and I'm definitely in a, the music industry has changed dramatically in the 20 plus years that I've been making music, and I feel like less like I understand the music industry than I ever did. And there's a part of me that's just not interested anymore in battling that beast.
Hmm.
Even as I, yeah, just released what feels like my most um, heartfelt record. I wish there was a better term for it.
'Cause it's called Tender Heart, right?
It is called Tender Heart.
And it's
There you go.
about some of what happened to your heart. So maybe heartfelt is the best way.
Yeah, true, 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 true.
I'm
Um,
curious, when you talk about reflecting about your changing ambitions, is that a consequence of sort of metaphorically reaching the mountaintop and then realizing, oh, there's always more mountaintops to scale? Like, for context to the listener, you've been a very successful musician, right? Like, you've toured with big names, you've sold records, you've won awards, you've been reviewed by Rolling Stone. Like, you've kind of like done it. Is the shift in ambition a consequence of that, of like the now what do I do sort of thing? Or is it just the middle age creeping in?
that's really interesting that you ask that, because all of those things are true, and yet I've never reached a level of success that, and maybe this is not even true of anyone, but I've never reached a level of success where it felt like I'll always have a career. Like I can always just lean on that career, um, and so I mean, it's just fascinating about what something looks like from the outside versus the inside.
Yeah.
But in some ways, you're right, because although maybe I haven't reached, like, I mean, exactly, there's endless mountaintops, and it's all relative. So I can look to my left and right and see people who are not doing, quote unquote, as well as me. And then, of course, see people who are doing much better. But I also have been in the vicinity of people who have reached what I think most people would consider the ultimate mountaintops and seen that it doesn't solve everything. It doesn't make people happy. It doesn't, like, that is a firmly cemented realization in my life, that there's not an outside mountaintop to reach that will forever and always be the solution to being a human being for the
Yeah.
rest of life. There's no mountaintop that will sustain us for the rest of time. And so it is that, it's like also coming into question, that purpose of making music has always been there, and so strongly. And now there's a questioning of, like, for the first time, because unlike a lot of my friends and my sister, for instance, who didn't know what they wanted to do with their lives, like I was so sure, and it's been heading in this direction for 20 years. And I'm having maybe what they experienced at 18 or 25, going like, well, what is my purpose here I mean, and we all have that question always, right? But um, it feels very strong right now, and a sense of, like, wanting to um, be useful in the world, even though music has that, can have that, but it's all about sort of how you go about it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that like perhaps how to describe this? That sort of period of life where you're checking in and asking big questions and feeling big sensations and wondering, how do I want to spend my time? Who do I want to be? What do I want to commit to? What lights me up? What excites me? Because those things slowly, in my experience, those things slowly shift until one day you wake up and kind of look around and it's like, oh, what am I doing with my life? How is it 2024? What am I doing today? Um, and maybe this is a decent segue to your, for lack of a better phrase, like near death experience. Is there a
Yeah,
succinct way that you describe that? Is that adequate?
that's great. A
Yeah.
near death experience.
So, I mean,
Exactly.
you had a near death experience in a literal way, not like the um, food poisoning in Bali way in which I've experienced.
Well, you feel like you're going to die.
Yeah, where you wish that you were going to die at some moment. But so you had a transformative experience. Maybe we can detail that and then discuss some of the outfall of that, the
Yeah.
fallout,
Yeah. I like outfall.
outfall. That's like a
Yeah.
sewage outfall, though. You know that
Oh,
maybe.
didn't know that. Hadn't heard
Anyway, so I'm sure you've told the story a ton. I don't want to like bore you with it, but
No, no,
what's
it's
the
fascinating. I don't get bored with this story, and I
okay?
haven't told it too much.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we with this last record, we just specifically kind of steered away from just doing kind of blanket press. We just kind of picked what actually made real sense, and I'm really glad we did that because I just talked to you know interesting people rather than just like you know news grabs sort of thing. Anyway, yeah, 2020 September. So we were sort of early in the pandemic, and there was an earthquake in LA, very minor one, and but it was nighttime and it woke me up from I guess some probably a deep sleep, and from my perspective, uh, all I remember is when I started to come to after my heart had stopped and my breathing had stopped. And my husband Carl, I woke, like I said, I woke up from the earthquake. He was in the other room. I called out to him, and when he came in, I was already, I'd stopped breathing and my heart had stopped, and he started to try and resuscitate me while calling 911. And he got me breathing again, and that's when I started. That's where my memories start again, which is it was the strangest thing because my first consciousness was just being in a completely dark and peaceful place, and totally at peace, and hearing his voice very far away saying, well, at first I didn't know what he was saying, but I could just tell the tone. He was very calm and he was just saying, thank you for coming back to me, because I'd started breathing again. So he could tell I was um, on my way back. And I couldn't see and I couldn't move. And at first, like I said, it was really peaceful. But as I think I came back into my body sensations and consciousness, the time that I'd stopped breathing for, like that impact of that I was starting to feel that. So it was it was an unpleasant, and I just didn't know what had happened. So the more conscious I got, the more afraid I got. So I came from this really peaceful place back to life into a really scared place where like I said, I couldn't see and I couldn't move. Felt pinned to the bed, like really, really heavy. And I'm so glad Carl has such a. I mean, he first of all saved my life, but also that he was able to be this really calm presence while he's talking to the paramedics. And I mean, he was worried that because there'd been this earthquake that maybe all the paramedics would be like, it wasn't a big earthquake, but possibly it could have, who knows, in other areas of LA, that the paramedics wouldn't be here fast. And they were here in like 2 minutes. We live like, central LA. So there's hospitals close by, and so I'm in shock, and these giant it was the fire department got there, so these giant firemen, 5 of them, come tromping in their yellow pants with their braces, or what do you call them in America? Not braces, suspenders.
Suspend.
And they checked me out, and I was fine at that point, but they took me to the hospital, and of course, because it's COVID, Carl couldn't come with me, and it was it was pretty scary. That was that. I mean, the worst was over for me, but like in terms of the danger, but it was really the scary part for me was going to the hospital and not knowing whether there was anything wrong with me, like, and then they figured out that I have this syndrome where loud noises. I mean, the syndrome has lots of different causes, but it can be not caused by, but it can be triggered by a loud noise, and the heart, it does something where the electrical signals in the heart just don't line up, and so it tries to compensate by going faster and faster and faster, and it can't get back in sync, and then it stops because it's gone so fast it can't keep going. So, and a lot of people, it goes undiagnosed until an event like this happens randomly, and a lot of people die because there's not, maybe there's not someone there to resuscitate you or whatever. So then I had to have this defibrillator implanted in my chest, which I have now, and I have to take beta blockers on a daily basis to try and prevent it, because it's not something you can fix. It's only you can prevent future arrhythmia. So I'm super safe now, but yeah, it was I mean, I think really intense for Carl, because he saw me, eyes open, wooden eyes, not breathing, not no heartbeat, whereas I didn't experience any of that. I just experienced waking up into this strange body, and then going to hospital and all that. But I think I had a delayed reaction to it too. Like, I had to recover physically, because I ended up having to have 2 operations, and it's like they have to create a pocket in your chest, so it's quite a wound. So it was initially an intense recovery, and then it took me about 6 months before I think I started to deal with it on a mental level as opposed to just a physical level, and wasn't a very anxious person, but then just started getting panic attacks about 6 months after, and realized that I think I think it was a delayed reaction to it. The panic attacks were precipitated by a bout of vertigo, which I think is got some resonances with the earthquake, which my body experienced and precipitated. And I also became terrified of turbulence on an airplane after flying for 25 years and never being afraid of it. Loving the turbulence, actually. I get, even now it's like a physiological reaction that I can't stop. My body just goes, oh, this is danger. I have to talk myself out of it.
Yeah. It's like Pavlov's dogs, right? And they hear the bell and start drooling, and your body's like, oh, this is the last thing I remember before it all went black.
Exactly.
Is that
That's
it?
exactly. I mean, who knows if that's literally true, but that's my explanation for it, because it was, very, like, I got on a plane the first time after, no fear, wasn't thinking anything about it. Take off, fine. Turbulence hits. I just had a full on reaction to it. No way to predict that was going to happen, and that's the only thing that I can explain that would explain it, I think.
Yeah. And you had never had panic attacks previously?
No, no,
Gosh.
yeah,
And like of
and
all the
so
places to have one, up in a
oh,
plane, it's like perhaps you're trapped, you can't go anywhere, you're out of control.
yeah, it was awful. one of the worst experiences of my life for sure.
Yikes.
Yeah, yeah.
I've
And
like, go
yeah,
ahead.
and I know we talked on email about Vipassana, and
Yeah.
that just to add to that story, that's been really helping me get. It really helped me get grounded back to, literally grounded back to earth, so that I'm not on shaky ground mentally and physically. And I had this experience where I was sitting meditating after doing a 10-day course and probably been then meditating daily for like a few months, using this specific practice. And I felt the what felt like the earth move, like a turbulence or a earthquake style experience, except I knew that it wasn't real. It was just an experience, but my body reacted as expected, with this crazy fear and adrenaline that was kind of pushing up from my gut up, up to my throat. And I immediately wanted to stand up and open my eyes and, escape this feeling. And I had, what I think of as the Vipassana voice just tell me, um, just stay here, just stay with it. It was like saying,
Start again. Start again.
exactly, exactly. And and the guidance was like, just let it go through you, let the experience go through you. And I let it go
Mm.
through me rather than fighting it, which is what I feel like a panic attack is when you fight that fear. And it just went through me and out the top of my head, and it was a profound experience of I can get through those. I mean, it's not to say I might have another panic attack where I don't, but I feel like it just gave me this huge amount of confidence that if I can just let that go through me, I will be okay. It's like
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. It's like, I view it as like a tool. And then every day I kind of practice my tool, or a skill is perhaps a better
Yeah.
descriptor. Like every day I get better because I sit and I practice. And I'm looking right now, you have literally a guitar hanging above your shoulder. I picture it like that. Like you pick up the
Yeah.
guitar the first time and you're clumsy and it doesn't work. And then perhaps after some time, you have a moment of like, oh, I think I did that right. And then it's like, oh, I did that right again. And you get a little better. That's powerful.
Totally.
And for those listening that have never heard of it, Vipassana meditation, go to dhamma.org, DHAMMA.org. They're all over the world. They're free by donation. Check them out.
Yeah.
Um, and where do you want to take this conversation? Because I have questions, but what feels fun to like continue jamming on?
Oh, I'm I'm totally open. I mean,
Okay, can I ask you a
you
quick one then?
yeah, yeah.
Where, so you're in an earthquake, in a pandemic, you call out to your partner, and then you kind of like power down,
Mhm.
and then you kind of power back up, for
Mhm.
for lack of a better description.
I like
Um,
it.
can you say more about where you went or where you were? Like I read something and you described, quote, nothing was wrong, like wherever it was that you were. And I don't know. I don't really talk to that many people that have had a near death experience. So I'm intrigued.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I I want to know more. I want to talk to more people who've had near death experiences. I mean, I feel like that's the most peaceful experience I've ever had. I mean, it was very brief before some fear started to come in, and I think I can't, I don't know, I can't really explain whether that's just technically it's like, my senses were offline and so I couldn't fear anything, or but I had some consciousness, or whether you know, once you really cross over to the other side, there is peace. I mean, although, you could argue, well, I wasn't dead at that point, so I'm on this side. But maybe I'm remembering that there's peace over there. I just, like I noticed. I mean, Vipassana has been amazing in discovering this. Like, even when things are going well, like there's so much going on in the mind, and like undercurrents and reactions to things that mean that we're often not really at peace. And so it's an experience that feels very different, and I've had some moments in my life that come close, I think, like waking moments, but I think we don't even realize how much we're not at peace a lot of the time, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I'm not saying it is. I'm just, just that we are, I mean, yeah, we're animals that are trying to survive, and there's so many things that threaten, or have the perception of threatening our survival all the time, and
Yeah, and then when they're not around, we just make our own
oh,
with
exactly. Oh my
fears and
god.
dreams and disappointments and
Yeah.
projected anxieties.
Yeah, well, as you were saying, earlier about all those questions of what do I want to do with my life, who do I want to be, and it's like they're questions that I I mean, I feel blessed to ask because, I've got enough food. I've got enough, I've got shelter. Like I grew up being able to ask those questions. Not to say that, but I just imagine that for so much of human history, that's not what you're questioning,
Yeah.
Um,
It's like, who cares? Go to the coal factory for
yeah,
14 hours,
yeah.
7-year-old Mia. Like, shut
Right.
up.
Or, yeah, exactly. Or like even further back, like if we don't if we don't get this hunt, we don't eat.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we don't eat.
Yeah.
We don't eat.
I think so. One way when I did my 10-day sit, Vipassana, came out of it, and one way that I described it or tried to understand it was it was as if my nervous system or my body had like taken a little bulldozer or a crane and like scooped out another level of regulation and peace and calm that
Mm.
previously I didn't have access to. And while I certainly don't live there, I now know what it's like in my system and I have greater ability to access it sometimes. That makes sense?
Definitely. I
Like I
love
remember I
that.
got dropped off at this gas station. I was waiting for Kendra to come pick me up. And rather than like play on my phone or like look around, I found myself after a minute, I was like staring up at the clouds just on this little tiny pitch of grass next to a gas station. And then I was like, "Oh, you're a weird dude right now. Like, what are you doing?" I was just so content in the moment. It's such a cliche moment. I'm like, "Oh, I something's happened in a good way."
Oh, it's the greatest thing though. Like, I mean, yeah, maybe it seems weird, but it's like discovering that, before um, having access to this skill or tool, it's like, oh no, I'm alone with my thoughts. Like, oh, this is awful. And now it's like, I mean, I could go there, but if I want to drop into, you know, I'm waiting in a waiting room, or I'm stuck in traffic, or I'm some anywhere. Um, this can turn into like there's is like a universe inside there. I mean, like you were there on the side of the
Yeah.
road. You can sort of ignore it, or tap into it.
Yeah. It reminds me also once I had an experience with some psilocybin mushrooms and I was, long story short, at one point I blinked and opened my eyes and it was just black. And I had this moment of, oh, I've gone blind. But that because I was blinking, I could feel the sensation of my eyes opening and shutting. And everything was black. But it wasn't just that everything was black. Like the way I described it after was, it's not that there was nothing there. There was like a lack of nothing. It was like another level of nothing. I can't even explain it. And then my eyes kind of switched back on after a few seconds. I was like, what the fuck was that? But hearing you talk about your experience of the portal or the ether or wherever the heck you went to, and I remember reading and nothing was wrong. I had this
Mm.
moment of, oh, like it sounds similar in a way.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you have you gone to a somatic therapist or have you done any body work? I'm
I
curious.
haven't, but yeah, Brendan and Darren were telling me a little bit about that the other day, so it got piqued my interest.
Yeah, just to there are some really talented practitioners that are able to access what's inside the energetic systems, the body, the storage container, and get you out of your psychological reasoning analytical mind.
Mm.
It might be interesting to dabble, or to might be another rabbit hole to consider.
Yeah, totally, totally. Because yeah, I
Mm.
mean, as much as I love what meditation has brought me, I still live in the thinking. You know, it's like an, an incredibly powerful. The mind as a thinking apparatus is just unbelievably powerful and dominates
Yeah.
our worlds. And so
How?
to
Go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry, I
well,
just have like so many questions for you. I'm like
please,
biting my
please,
tongue.
jump in.
Um, how how has this changed the way that you look at the world? Like, has it been a pronounced, significant shift, or is it kind of like, yeah, I nearly died, but like now I've got a pacemaker and life goes on? How has it affected you?
Yeah, I mean the strongest effect definitely was at immediately afterwards for like the effect has
Worn
worn
off?
off a little, but I think there's still a fundamental shift that has stayed. So for 6 months or more, I mean, I was just unbelievably grateful for a second go round, um, and and could really tap into, and I still can today, just but maybe it just takes a little bit more of an actual effort to notice how, I mean, I don't even know, these words are so difficult, like blessed or lucky, or you know because it's not, um, yeah, I don't know what it is that has me have this set of circumstances that I have, but just, you know the relation, like a profound gratitude for the relationships in my life, and that I think is the thing that made a big leap, was like how much more important they are than pretty much anything else. Yeah, my health and my relationships, kind of right there at the top, and that dropping away again. It was already on kind of a trajectory, but it was like a bigger, precipitous dropping away of like the need for some kind of outside adulation, validation. Um, that has continued, um, and also, yeah, this, I guess this questioning came into play as well, around like, what is my purpose here, and which is still unanswered. I mean, ever being answered and sort of unanswered all the time, but with my husband too, Carl, it was like we were already I think had a great relationship, but it just like bonded us in this way that was very profound. It was just, yeah, I mean, I think I've always been kind of curious about death and sort of read books about it and wanted, I've kind of kept it in my consciousness. Some people find that morbid and or there's like some taboos around it, but I've always found it to be uplifting to be aware of the fact that we're mortal as much as possible, because it's just really easy to forget. I mean, I think, and I can see how it might, if you think about it too much, maybe it would be debilitating, but I don't find it debilitating. I find it, yeah, enlivening to go. And so that was already true, but then to have an actual experience where it's like, wow, I, that could have been just that was it. And I mean, weirdly, it sort of lessened my fear of death. Um, and also made me realize that like I'd be okay if that had been the end. Like, I mean, of course I would have been dead, so I wouldn't have had any say in the matter. But like, I felt this sense, and I wouldn't have felt that at 25, and
Mm.
it's kind of a weird experience because, well, what am I still doing here then? Like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Yeah, and maybe that's not even the right question, right? The doing rather than
Right, right,
the being or the feeling or the
right.
right? But when you were
Totally.
talking about the release of external adulation or validation, that to me sounds like a permission slip for freedom in a sense of, hey, you don't need any of that. You're free from all those judgments and expectations. And I think in that regard, just projecting myself there, it can almost feel overwhelming or like, oh, I could do anything? Or if I'm not chasing that, what am I doing here?
Well,
Right?
that's where it's paradoxically a little like, thanks for saying that or pinpointing that, because I think it is so open, everything's possible, that's a little bit overwhelming. You're absolutely right. It's like there's so much wrapped up in our drives, and I think they're, somewhat evolutionary drives to like strive to be admired and to be have status and all of that. And if you take that away, like it's like what are my drives?
Yeah. Yeah. Like one way I love conversations like this so much. Like one way I've played around with that was like, okay, how do I define success? Right?
Yeah,
How do I define enough? How do I define
yeah.
a rich life?
Hmm.
And I've like written a post years ago of like, what if success was how you felt when you looked in the mirror? Or the other day I was joking with Kendra of like, what if success was like how many flowers you could count in a walk around your neighborhood? Or like success is anything, right? Um, but it almost feels like listening to your description here is like a picture like that baby giraffe metaphor where it's like, oh, hey, new software, new reality. Like, and the baby giraffe's kind of like trying to find its feet and it's stumbling around. It's like, where the heck am I? And it almost feels like you are still figuring it out at the moment.
Definitely. And I wonder if part of it is just getting okay with what's always been true, but I've tried to sort of hide from, is the un the non guarantees of being alive. Like there's just no sort of like, oh, there's the path. I'll know what I'm doing, and I'll always have the answers. Like there's not, that doesn't exist. And I think I tried to create that, and of course always failed, but still pigheadedly just kept, convincing myself I just keep digging down this way, I'll get that, I'll get that certainty. I'll get
Mm.
that guarantee. And to just be okay with the unknown. And, it's, I mean, I think it's really difficult.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a practice for a reason, right? It's like a
exactly.
meditation practice, a yoga practice. Like it's not a yoga finish or like a
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
do you feel that way about guitar to like bring it back to music? Because you're like a legit guitar player, right? Like you're really good. Do you feel it's analogous to what we're describing here? That like you'll never quite master it, or there's always
Oh,
more to, you know?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's I mean, I couldn't believe how, like I moved to Boston when I was like 29 and met this guitarist who I just loved. And like I asked him if he would give me a lesson even though he's not a guitar teacher, and he was willing to show me some of his tricks. And just like opened up this whole other world that I had no idea was there. And that was like, what, 15 years into um being a guitarist, and I mean, I feel like there's just so much more I could learn. And I wish I was more, again, like there's that ambition thing, like for some reason that ambition has sort of died off. But and I mean, and it could change again, so who knows.
Yeah. Or like the ambition is like turned its head and found something new and shiny, so to speak. And that might be like the lack of ambition is the new ambition, so to speak. Right?
Totally. Totally.
Like I'm very ambitious to not be ambitious
Yeah.
in the modern
Exactly.
sense, right? That's my ambition.
I
It's
love
even
that.
more confusing. Like, well, what
Lack
does
of
that
ambition is
mean?
the new ambition, is the
Yeah.
saying.
And so then how like as an artist, as a creator, because you're putting out music, you put out an album called Tender Heart, and I imagine there is still some desire to have it be like good or to be proud of it or to have it represent yourself or this period of your life. Like how has that freedom from adulation, external validation, etc., transmitted towards your creative process, if at all?
Yeah, well, this last record was the most enjoyable to create. I think a huge part of it was that I was going after the things you first mentioned, like, you know, or I've already forgotten what you said, but just like going after the craft and the expression rather than the adulation and validation. And so what that meant in terms of making this record was, I opened myself more to my collaborators. And I wasn't so tightly holding on to control and um trying to make something that, I mean, of course I've always tried to make something that I like, but always within mind of like, well, like what will other people think of this? And a lot of that, it's not completely gone, of course, but a lot of that falling away, it's so much more enjoyable. It's like you're just following the muse, which, in terms of creativity, I feel like there is something mysterious that's maybe not coming from me. That's something more that I get to tap into if I'm willing, and I can follow instead of um, going like, no, I want the song to be this way. And I've fought with songs in the past, like this song's supposed to be you know, an aggressive da 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 kind of song, and try and make it that way, and it just kind of falls flat. And whereas follow what the song, I think we did a lot. We followed what the song was asking of us,
Mm.
and that's when it worked. It's when it came
Yeah.
together. So, and that's it's not always easy to hear what the songs are, asking you to do, but like it's such a beautiful experience to like, take all these wrong turns and then keep being willing to listen for what you're being asked to do, and then finally arriving there, and then feeling like that. I mean, that's the beauty of like this. You once removed, it's like it's almost like, oh well, I don't have to be too attached to this because I just followed what I was being asked to do. It wasn't me doing it, which means like, oh, all the credit is mine, or all of the failure is mine.
Hmm. Have you read Rick Rubin's book, the
Oh,
the
no, but
Creative
I want to
Act? I
because
think
I've
it's called.
read some interesting interviews with him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's similar to what you're describing here. He's very philosophical guru-esque in the way that he approaches creativity, and the book is a series of like longer fortune cookie-esque. That's a really perhaps horrible way to describe it, but very philosophical, meandering, musing about the way that he approaches creativity and songwriting and music production. And there's
Nice.
some overlap to how you just described it there for sure.
I should I should get that book. I really liked, and he's done such a massively vast,
Oh
different
yeah.
array of art. Worked with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, I don't play instruments. Like I have no
Yeah.
technical ability. I just like am really good at helping people." He's almost like a Sherpa for
Yeah.
creatives, it seems. Like you get him in the studio and he can like kind of guide them to themselves or get them out of their way of themselves, so to speak.
Yeah. I love that.
It
That's
sounds
what
like that's what you were just describing here with this last album of maybe getting out of the way of yourself a bit more than before.
for
And
sure. For sure. And it was really beautiful to like kind of reach that same place with, my band members at at the same time. Like we were all more willing to do that. And there was, that was a beautiful I guess stroke of luck that we converged on that at the same time.
does it feel risky to take less control, so to speak? Or like to embrace
Absolutely.
uncertainty? Like how do you deal with that?
Yeah. It does. And I mean I guess I would say that my years of experience making records is what helped me, like trying it that way, the other way, for so many records, um, really helped me. If I was starting to feel like, oh, I need to make this work, just being reminded that I've tried it, and it doesn't work, and so there were definitely little like cul-de-sacs that you get into, that you know old habit patterns, um, and so it wasn't just like all smooth sailing, easy breezy, but I just yeah and as I've said, the near death experience like definitely kept informing this record. Like it just kept bringing me back to like, oh well, there's nowhere to get to on this song. Like there's only trying things and feeling it out, and like we took our time to, and you know there was no money pressure. Like I got a grant, and we kept the overhead pretty low, and so we could explore a bit, and um just yeah, like try and follow it where it leads. It's a very weird process, and like you said, that living in the uncertainty, and in fact, once the uncertainty stops, like the records are done, and so it's like almost trying to remember that. And I did have this experience of like sitting there, in the studio, putting a guitar part down and going like, this is where it is. Like it's not when we've finished the record, like then it's over. This is where the experience is. And it's true. It's like, I mean, I'm not one to really go back and listen much to records, so it's like don't wish for it to be over, because then it's over.
Hmm.
it's a
Yeah.
whereas
It's
in the
such,
past it was like, when's I've got to get to that end date. Like there's always this compulsion to get the thing done.
yeah. And I think that is at the heart of much of our culture, right? Which is
Yeah.
like achieve, succeed, get the raise, get the job, win the award, like the finish line focus, which ironically is a mindset that never ends because as soon as you get to the finish line, you're looking for the next race, right? And
Yep.
you can forget that you're actually in a race. It's like, hang on, enjoy the jog, enjoy the
Yeah.
ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and that reminds me of how, you know, the teacher of Vipassana that you were saying earlier is this guy Goenka from Burma talks about being addicted to the wanting, like that really resonates with me. Like we're not actually addicted to the achievement because as soon as the achievement's
Yeah.
done, we want another thing. So it's like it's the one addicted to the wanting.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I'm reading a book right now called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and it's all about phone-based childhoods and adolescent mental health. And in one section, he's talking about the dopamine hit that these systems are engineered to give us when we use them. Things like Instagram and social media, they're all gamified. But he's talking about how dopamine in our brain actually generates wanting. It doesn't generate fulfillment. And so it generates the desire for more. So we keep going, we keep playing, we keep checking, etc. And I'm
Yep.
just putting the parallels together with Goenka, who talks about craving and aversion as the two kind of main causes of suffering. It's like, oh, just, and it sounds so easy. Just stop craving and wanting things
Yeah.
and just stop avoiding those other things, and you'll just be in the present moment and life will be sweet. It's like, oh, I'm trying, man.
Yeah. It's really hard. It's really hard. And
Yeah.
it's true because it's not like it's obvious with drug addiction or something that there's a problem, but it's not obvious with just a craving and aversion to the daily things that we
Yeah.
want and don't want. And so, I mean, I haven't read that book, but I that author's really interesting and I've seen that in myself with social media. It's like even for a full grown adult who's like already got a life, I feel like that shit is dangerous. It's like it is so powerful because of it's tapping into a biological system that we don't really fully aren't aware of is going on. It's like the
Yeah.
thought, oh, I want to eat, and the brain goes dopamine, yes, go towards that. Like that's the right direction to head, and we get that same hit with another like flick up the screen to get to the next, or it does it for you.
Yeah.
You don't even have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that was interesting in that book that I took away from, or I'm taking away, is he talks about the idea of off ramps, whereby
Mm,
these companies, they'll create something like a notification, for example, is a very obvious off ramp where you're reading a book or you're having a conversation and it's like bing, phone lights up, you check it, you've gotten a notification from Instagram. Just the recognition of the off ramp generates a little bit of dopamine, which is
mm,
like, oh, I wonder what's there. I wonder what's happening
mhm,
there. So it
mhm,
gives you that little bit of desire, right?
mhm,
Which is very difficult to avoid when you have multi-billion-dollar companies spending hundreds of millions of dollars with the best scientists in the planet to alpha beta test everything to create the perfect thing that you can't control. But
and then you imagine
nonetheless,
being a kid and
yes, yeah.
I'm
So
just
that's what the whole book is about of depression, suicide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
All these different. Anyway, it's an interesting book. He's an interesting author, though. Jonathan
yeah,
Haidt. He's written some cool stuff.
yeah, I'd really like to read that one too.
Coddling of the American Mind is
Yeah,
another one.
I've read that.
Yeah, you're like okay.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you've got a new album out. It's called Tender Heart. You feel, how do you feel about it?
I feel super proud of this record. Like just and just at peace about it. Like it feels like the most authentic. I don't love that word, but there's something very funny about singing is like you'd think is just like the most sort of direct expression of I don't know, like it's coming literally out of your body, not even through your hands into a guitar, but just directly, and through your voice, which is like the way we communicate and the way we um and and yet I feel like looking back, I I mean did had no awareness of this at the time, but looking back, I feel like I was just putting artifice on top of my voice for years. Like I was just trying to sound a certain way rather than just what is my voice? What does my voice sound like if it's got no extra stuff added
Like, what
to
would
it?
the extra stuff be? Like, trying to make it like smoky cigarette vibe or like crooner vibe or like, how do you describe that?
Yeah, I think with me it was like the impulse. The reason I was doing it was um, I wanted to be loud, like I wanted to be heard, and it was almost like a um, I came up. It was very male dominated industry at the time, um, and not and I actually had I was that wasn't a bad experience. Like I all the musicians I met and the people I encountered were very encouraging, but somehow I had this idea that like I had to stand out by being like I had to be loud. I think in my person I didn't know how to assert myself, and I'm small, and like it was this way for me to have this power or assertiveness or something. So yeah, it was I think putting on a lot of like extra power, putting on, but like what's the word? Like just um, injecting strength, and whether that was real or not, like I mean, it's a really interesting. I find a really interesting conversation because I don't know that maybe there is no ultimate authentic, completely authentic like vocal expression because you know even to this day, like I love every little nuance is something I'm choosing. It's not just random. So am I choosing something because it's like
Hmm.
my authentic expression, or am I choosing it because it's like, oh, I think people would think that I'd sound great doing that, like, so it's still, I'm not saying I'm out of it, but it's like I look back and go, wow, I can hear all this like extra artifice that I'm putting on, and now it feels like this record is, you know, trying, as down to the bone as I have been able to get in terms of just like this is my expression direct without a bunch of extra, and some of the greatest singers in the world, maybe some of what we love about them is the stuff they put on top, the like extra stuff. So I'm not even sure that um it's better or worse. It's just that it's an interesting feeling to sort of feel like I'm just doing it rather than imagining what it needs to be to impress people. Or so yeah, to answer the question, I feel really um, grateful for this record and this recording experience. And it's not a record I could have made at any other time in my life. I mean, it's also a really gentle record, and again, that ties in with what I was saying about
Hmm.
previous iterations of me have been like, much more of a sense like I have to prove myself. I have to like push something out instead of allowing something to come through.
Yeah, it's a
Hey, I love
subtle, profound shift, right?
that.
Have
Exactly.
you had any feedback from bandmates or friends or family as to how you're different now in this, perhaps like bandmates now from a creative context? Have you received feedback about your shifts or anything different?
Yeah, for sure. Especially, Sid, who you've met, who's been a long
Mhm.
time collaborator. We started working together in 2010, and we've made every record together. He either as producer and drummer, or just drummer, and yeah, I mean, I definitely got that reflection back. That me like just loosening my grip on the control of the whole thing, especially dramatically on this record, was something that um, he
Felt.
noticed for sure, for sure. And I don't know if this is um, just coincidental, or it feels not coincidental, but that the the people who've been touched by this record, it feels like it's way more profound than any other record that I've made. Like the people who are coming out to shows and actually coming up afterwards to like chat about, buy the record or chat about it. Just there's a sense of its impact being much more emotional, deep than any previous record, which feels really
Wow.
good because it's kind of
Yeah,
like
it gives me goosebumps. Like,
sweet,
yeah, when we talked earlier about, how do I define success? Maybe it's like
right?
that. It's like the quality of compliments that I'm receiving after a show. I imagine you would get a lot of um, great show, love your voice, God, you're good. But what it sounds like here is you're getting a lot more personal, heartfelt, you've changed my life kind of style of comment from listeners. Is that right?
Totally. And that, you know, is so much more powerful than like, oh, you're good. You're good at what, you're great at what you do. Or like have been, or to be useful to other people in that way. I know useful sounds a bit harsh, like, or I don't know, it's not quite the right word, but like to have done
Hmm.
something that other people could benefit from, you
Like
know.
supportive, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or help someone um, process, or get through those are the, just, oh, you helped me get through this really rough patch, like those kinds of things are, kind of amazing. And even then it's like, it's not something you can truly, like, I can't live in the like warm glow of those comments, like they just sort of,
Yeah,
um they arise and pass away.
exactly. Yeah, it's a trick, right? Because if you,
Yeah,
you want to bask in the warm glow of that, then you also have to bask in the freezing fire of vitriol and hatred that will come on the other side of it, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I
Absolutely.
think I mean, it's such an interesting career that you have in that you make songs, yeah, but also you create soundtracks to people's lives or chapters of people's lives. Like we've all been in places where we hear a song and it's like whoosh, like, oh yeah, college breakup, or like whoosh, like that speedboat in Thailand that time. Like I remember I heard The Killer's new album on a speedboat in Thailand for the first time on like one earbud with my buddy. Like takes me back. It's like such a unique job that you have, I think. And then to hear from people say to you in person must be a really surreal and incredible experience.
It is really surreal. Like, I think it's because, I have those experiences too with other people's music.
Hmm.
I know how powerful that is, and yet it's almost a little not a little like uh disturbing or something to imagine being the person responsible for that experience for someone else.
Is
Like,
it
I
like
don't want to be
imposter
them too.
syndrome? All right.
I don't know, not imposter, like more like I'm not my music as well. And I think
Hmm.
I mistook people for their music when I was younger, and I think a lot of people do that. So I think
Hmm.
people like project onto you that you are the source of that, when it's like it's really their experience, and they're happening to like resonate with your music, and also deciding what it means.
Yeah. I'd be curious for you to say more about this idea of separating the art from the artist. I've like, so I work as a life coach. I talk to a lot of people. People are scared to put their words and their work out on the internet. And like one thing I've tried to communicate at different times is like, look, like you're not your Instagram post. Like you're not your video of 3 minutes talking about yoga. Like you
Mm-hmm.
are, but you're not. You have to put your whole heart and your spirit into it. But then it just kind of goes. And if people love or hate that thing, that's not you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a really interesting space to navigate. And I'm curious, as somebody that has been in the public limelight, lots of ears on your music, like how do you navigate that stuff?
Yeah, well, I guess it was, the experience of realizing that, especially when I was, like I said, fighting songs and trying to make this like a pure representation of me, and like just totally failing, and realizing that there's no such thing. Like I'm this person over here, and then I can make something, and time passes, and in some cases I come to love the thing that I made, and in some cases I come to hate it. It's like, what? How can I be inside that thing? It's not, um, you know, in fact, it's not even an expression of me. It's an expression of me at a very specific moment and age, and that's it. That's all it is. And like, I mean, Instagram posts are even more ephemeral. It's like, you know,
Mm.
you might realize 2 weeks later that, oh God, I'd say that so differently now. Like, how stupid was that? It was like, well, that's just what you knew how to say then, and it's gone and it's done. And then I also had to realize and pull my head in, because I'd there were these artists that I couldn't stand their music, and like disliked them as people. And then I'd meet them and go like, "Oh, this is a really cool person." And just go, "You have to separate it. Like, they are not their music, and
Mm.
um I'm not my music, and I don't want, if I want to be treated, not that it guarantees it, but if I want to be treated as a person regardless of what my music is, I need to treat people." I mean, this is like a
Yeah.
basic tenet of my values, to like treat people well, regardless of whether I think they've said something or made something, okay.
Yeah. I have a friend, and we were talking about a mutual friend years ago. And I asked them, like, oh, did you see their new piece of writing or whatever online? And this person said to me, I love blank, but they're not my messenger. Meaning, hey, like the work that they put out in the world like doesn't resonate with me at this time. They're not my messenger, but I love them regardless, right? And I
Totally.
think that's what you're describing here. It's this like advanced level of humaning, so to speak.
Right?
And then applying it to yourself is the next level.
Right.
Right? Like I'm not my messenger.
Yeah.
uh
I might not even like my music or some of it, or or like it in 5 years or 10 years, like,
yeah.
which is fine as long as I'm not attached.
Yeah, and that's the practice, right? It's like get on
Yeah.
the mat, get, sit down, start
Yep.
again, start
Basic.
again, start again.
Basic.
Um, is there anything that we've not talked about where you're sitting there like, yo, Jer, how could you not toss me this softball question
Oh,
on the podcast?
well, you might not even know this, so I can't blame you, but I just because it's
Okay.
fun to think about, I just wanted to say, thanks for asking. That this song Dare, which is the opening track of the album, which we wrote before. So I write with my husband Carl. Like, we have since 2 records ago, we discovered this ability to write music together, which is amazing. And we started writing this song before the heart thing happened. That seems to be like a premonition of it. It's like it mentions um, the quake, and the death waiting, and like it just is crazy. And I'm not a very woo woo person, but I can't. I find this hard to explain.
I'm the
Uh,
same. I'm like, I'm a scientist, but sometimes life happens, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with that.
exactly, exactly. I love the fact. I mean, this I've experienced before with songwriting. I'll write a song. I don't really know what it's about, and that's the beauty of not writing prose, is that it doesn't necessarily have to make sense. In a sort of um, obvious way, can just be sort of poetic or just interesting sounding words. I love, I've always been open to that. But I'll find like a couple of years later, I'll be like, oh, that song just totally makes sense in the context of my life since then. Not in super like specific ways. But with this one, it's like, oh, that's almost like a premonition. So
So that's
I
the
love
first
that.
single off the new album
It is no, actually it came out. It's the first song on the
on the record.
if you still have play a record in order. Yeah, it's called Dare.
There, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I assume it's on YouTube or Spotify or something.
Totally, totally.
Okay. So if you're
Yeah.
listening, uh, go and listen to the music. I'll include a link to the album.
Thank you.
What's the best way, like, where do you direct people now to find your music? Because it is such a weird industry and a weird space. Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking to myself about maybe next time I make a record, just putting it out on vinyl, not putting it on
Oh,
not putting it on streaming services.
that's
I mean,
interesting.
yeah, streaming has, I mean, the whole digital revolution has decimated.
Mm,
I mean, big artists are still fine, but an artist of my size, like the
yeah,
streaming revenue does not make up for the loss of physical sales. And so, since it's doing that anyway, so I mean, the best way would be to go and buy a vinyl or a CD if
yeah.
you are that way inclined. But if you just want to check it out, I think, um, like, check out the video for "Thank You," which is one of the songs off the record, on YouTube, or
Okay.
"Dare," both on YouTube.
So video, I'm taking notes. Video on YouTube for Dare and Thank You.
Yes,
I think I
the
watched
"Thank
that
You"
one. Is that
video.
where he's like, "Thank you, love you, forgive you"? Is that the?
Hmm. Which is
Because I saw
also
you
a
sell
song.
T-shirts too with that, and the T-shirts are pretty dope with that chorus on there.
Great.
I did see that in your shop, so maybe I'll put a link to your shop too.
Great. And Brendan Willing James shot that "Thank You" video.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
He's like a good friend for those listening. He's been on the podcast too years ago. I
Yeah.
roped him in. Um,
Great.
all right. Well, Mia, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. Uh,
Same. I hope we get to connect in person sometime
yeah,
in the next 10 years.
that would be great. When are you coming up to Vancouver for a show,
Oh,
actually? Or
I know.
Squamish?
I
How do we get you
know.
up here?
I would love to. I would love to. I'll work on that. How about that?
Okay. The seed's planted, at least.
Totally. Well, if you
Um,
come down here too, you have to let us know if you're visiting Brendan.
I was literally in LA like 3 weeks ago.
No.
Yeah. It was this, I don't know if you experience this, probably when you go back to Australia. It just seems like it's never enough time. And I'll make it longer and then just more people like, and then it fills up and it goes so quick and it's like, what just happened?
Absolutely.
Which is all
And
to
also,
say, I do want to see you. That would be fun. Uh, actually, what does it feel like to have a pacemaker?
oh, well, it shouldn't feel like anything for most people, but unfortunately for me, like um, just my physiology, it, the reason there's not a lot of space, like I don't know, but
You're like a
the
smaller human, is that
I'm a
why?
smaller human, and these things are made one size fits all. Um, And
I didn't know that about pacemakers,
yeah,
actually.
exactly. I guess they're made as small as they possibly can be. They used to be like the size of a laptop. The first iteration, which you had to carry around outside your body and then have it going into your somehow going through the skin, was a
Whoa.
laptop size. And now it's like a credit card, but a thick credit card size. Um, I weirdly can feel some of um, the paces. So because my heart rate's super low naturally, they set my heart rate to not go below 50, and so it's pacing me like, you know, sometimes throughout the day, and I can feel the lower ventricle or whatever. I can't remember the two different names. It just sort of feels like I'm getting a little flick, which I shouldn't be feeling, but there's nothing they can do about it. It's just somehow my heart muscle is like so close to my the the chest muscle, and it comes through. And in fact, the reason I had to have that second operation was that the um the wires that go into the heart had like perforated the heart and were touching the heart muscle. Sorry, the chest muscle. So like then it was like a really intense electric sort of
Like your
shock.
pec would contract, kind of?
Yeah, I was
Like,
getting, well, I don't know if it would contract, but it was just a really unpleasant, like
yeah.
weird feeling, flicking, but a much more intense version of the thing I still feel now. Um, so it's always it's a little reminder. Like throughout the day, I might be, especially if like I'm leaning, if I'm leaning over because it's on this side, it somehow that makes it more obvious, and it just reminds me, like, oh, that's right, you're
Yeah.
alive, and you could be dead.
Yeah. Jeez. Like, oh yeah, you're not dead. You have
Yeah.
this little like guardian angel living inside your body, that's just
Yep.
keeping an eye on things,
Yep. Yep.
which in itself is such a insanity. Like,
Exactly.
what? It's
I
just
know. And
monitoring your heart rate and then just every so often giving you a little poke. Like, hang on,
yeah,
come on, let's go.
yeah. And like what glorious technology that they, rather than just giving me a massive defibrillation shock, which is what it can do if the heart does that thing, it first will try and pace me back into place. So it will try and do it without this
Yeah.
what's supposedly like being kicked. People have said who've had it happen. It's like being kicked in the chest by a horse if you actually have the defibrillator go off. But first,
Wow.
yeah, this technology is like, well, first we'll try and flick it back into place.
Before the we call the horse over.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's
And
pretty
then
cool.
how long does it last? Like, do you have to charge it or what's the?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. So the pacemaker itself started with a 13-year battery life, but I'm using it so little that even after 3 years, it's still got a 12-year battery life. So it's like, hopefully it's
Oh,
gonna. But then the other problem or the other issue is that the wires to the heart have to be replaced every 20 years. So I mean,
wow.
if they replace the wires, they'll replace or if they
Yeah.
replace the battery, yeah, it means I'm going to have some operations in the future, or the technology will. I mean, they're working on
Oh
technology
yeah.
to like, you know, make it even more streamlined and seamless. And I don't know what that will be, but yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. If I,
It's wild. And like we still have to charge our cell phones every day. But then you can just put this thing in your chest and be like, yeah, you got 13 years. You're good.
I
It's fine.
know, what the
What
hell?
what a miracle.
Wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, you're a gem. Thank you for coming on. It's great to see you again and connect after all those years.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thanks so much for having me. It's been really great. Great chat.
yeah. And I'll put links in the show notes to the songs, the albums. I know you've got an Instagram, a website. Anything I'm missing there?
That's it.
Does that
Thank
sound it?
you. Sounds
Okay,
great. Appreciate
cool.
it.
No, of course. And I'm excited to go listen to the album. I listened to like, I didn't hear Dare. I think I listened to that Thank You track when it came out.
Mhm,
And I was like,
mhm.
that was
Yeah,
the first, I think, seed that planted for me of, oh, she's integrating her life experiences into music. And that's really interesting. And then I think a couple months went by and I was like, okay, I want to talk to this lady. This seems
Awesome.
cool. Yeah. All right. Well, take care. Good luck, and
Thank you.
hope to
You
see
too.
you soon.
Beauty.
Okay. So that was my conversation with Mia Dyson. As mentioned in the show notes, I'm going to put a link to her new single, Dare. There's a video on YouTube that you can check out. I'll put that there too. I've got a link to Dhamma.org, which is the Vipassana meditation retreat that we have discussed, that we've both been on. She's got a shop. She's got a website. She's got an Instagram. I'll put that all in the show notes. And you know what? You're great. I appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing and supporting and learning and expanding your heart and your mind so that we can have more compassionate and connected conversations to elevate the collective, to make kindness cool and compassion commonplace. Let's go. Until next time, I hope you smile often. I hope you feel loved. And I hope you remember that you are awesome, just as you are.